sense for me to possibly have engaged in it, but I did everything possible to avoid it. Everything possible. I didn't throw anything, I didn't burn anything, I didn't smash anything, I didn't punch anybody, I didn't do any of that. I simply was there to protest because I think that a bunch of people coming into my area to reject the results of a democratic election, I think it makes sense for me to go there and say, nah, this guy on my shirt won. No, goodbye. And so I'll play this video quick. Let's see how it goes. To me, it's Dylan. I am going to the Million MAGA March. I was just sitting around at home. I didn't really have much to do. I got a lot of work done, so I had some extra time. Thought I'd go down there in my Biden-Harris merch and, have a polite discussion with the people who think this election was stolen by the person I'm going there in their hoodie of. So I'm sure they'll all have a polite discussion with me and it'll go 100% okay. I'm not there to start anything. I'm just there to kind of see what's going on, since I'm a local to the area. I'm DMV born and raised. Let's see how it goes. Okay, so I go there, I arrive, and I make the tweet, they don't seem to like me very much. And what I meant by that is I was walking by some Trump people, and I was getting some bad scowls. I was starting to walk towards the area of the march. Now, most of the march was over by the time I got there. I got there like around maybe 4 or 5. Most of the event was already kind of completed and donezo. So it was more just people who were slowly leaving, or people who were just staying for the long haul for the whole night, right? Did they shove me? No. I can say that I was never attacked at that point in the event. They didn't shove me, just give me really bad scowls. It was very obvious they weren't happy that I was there. And so I was just walking by, and eventually I keep walking and I arrive at BLM Plaza, right? I just kind of follow where the crowds are coming from. But before I get to BLM Plaza, I kind of come towards this intersection that's around the area, and it's just a bunch of people yelling at each other. It's really benign. It's nothing to mention. Get a job, Nazi, da-da-da. It's like a bunch of just, very high-level intellectual debate going on, street debate. See right here, lots of go home, you don't live here. Yeah, exactly. It was a bunch of locals who were not happy that the Trump people were here protesting for a reason which they thought was silly, right? Some counter-protesters were shouting, take the L. I personally thought that was funny. And see, they were mixing it up. See, like, there's anti-Trump people and Trump people just mixing it up. They're not punching anybody. They're not swinging anything. At this point, and again, this is from my perspective. I'm not claiming that it didn't happen anywhere else. This is just what I saw. These are just what I saw from my perspective. At this intersection, they're just mixing it up. So nothing of real explosive energy, nothing like that. And this is exactly how I was hoping it would go. And I was very happy to see. I didn't think there would be as many counter-protesters as there were. I was very happy to see it. I did not even know there was a counter-protest. I assumed there might be some up there. But I went up there, and thankfully there was people who were also there kind of protesting. Another thing, and this is a consistent theme during the entirety of the event. I saw 2, maybe 3 tops the whole event, possibly the highest maybe being 4. I saw very few people. Yeah, Viv, if you want to talk with you about it, I'd be very happy to. I saw very few pro-MAGA people wearing masks. Very few. One of the best ways you could kind of tell if somebody was on this side or that side during these like weird moments that happened later was just to see if they had a mask or not at some point. A lot of times there would just, you could see, it was like bright and day. You'd see counter-protesters, all of them wearing masks. Now someone would say, oh, I remember somebody was in my replies like, oh, you wore a mask because you're a coward. No, I wore a mask because I was concerned about like the health. And you want to see the mask I wore to hide my identity? Oh, wow. We'll never figure out who this guy is now. I wonder who this fellow is. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I'm a totally different person now. I'm actually President Obama now. You couldn't even tell. I could be Obama. Who knows? Where did I go? But yeah, so I saw very few people on the Trump side wearing masks. There were some, not many. And this was also true for day 2 when I went to the walk away anti-Democratic Party march. There was very few wearing masks, whereas the counter-protesters, most of them were. Okay. So I go going. I'm just marching. I see some local art. Oh yeah. There was a lot of weed throughout the whole event. Just weed everywhere. Now, D.C., of course, has different marijuana laws than the state of Maryland. But, I mean, I was just Always, and the second day I went there too. Smell of weed everywhere. Not really of note, particularly. I saw some people smoking weed. It was no big deal. I just saw a lot of weed. Just was a constant thing that was there. Eventually, I get there, and this I found funny. And this is just true of DC in general. There's always people selling stuff. If you go to DC, there's like the younger people who are selling water bottles. You got the food vendors. If you go to DC, honestly, if it's your first time in DC, don't go to a restaurant. And I mean this. Do not go to a restaurant for your first meal. Go to a food vendor. Go to a street vendor. It's a lot better than you think. Those the food trucks are even better. A lot of times. I mean, and the portions you can get are just amazing. Like, really good. If you are hungry, go to a food vendor on the street. Don't go to a restaurant in DC. Okay? They are great. But on to this. What I saw, I at some point saw people with Black Lives Matter t-shirts selling Trump merch. It was just constant hustle. People going through the Biden crowds with the Biden merch, and then they'd switch it out with Trump merch, and then go through the Trump crowds. It was such a hustle. Such a hustle. Yeah, I'll talk to you about, after I do the full description, Viv, of what happened, I'll come in and talk with you. Small scuffles broke out. So these small scuffles, I'll talk about these. These were just basically like one person shoves another, they shove back, and that was it. It was like nothing of really importance. They barely even crossed my mind at the moment. The only ones that I'll really talk about in detail is the ones I have pictures of. So just like a few shoving matches, and mostly shouting, to be completely honest. Of course, one person without a mask, one person with a mask. This shield wall will become so important later in the story. This shield wall eventually, as you can see some Antifa stuff, you know, the anarchy symbol, all that. This shield wall was basically present from this point forward throughout the whole event. This is lore. This right here would constantly move where it is. They would move back and protect different flanks where you would have, so they wouldn't always like face the cops. It almost seemed like most of the time early on, they were there in front of the flanks. And later on, it was definitely not, they were there in front to stop the cops. It mostly, later on, it had to do with the Proud Boys. Later on, it was most certainly more about the Proud Boys. Hey, Tori News, thank you so much for the raid. I can't take too much time to thank you because I'm trying to get through this. So, thank you so much, though. So, it seemed like mostly the shields were there to protect the flanks, and I want to say this right now, I never saw them used in an offensive capacity. I never saw somebody pick up their shield and slam it down to somebody's head. I never saw them charge with the shields at the cops. I never saw any of that. It seemed to 100% be used for defensive purposes. Is that true for the whole city? I don't know, but that's true for what I saw. Only used in defensive purposes, even later when the Proud Boys got involved. That is 100% what I can say. So I never saw, so when it comes to a shield being a defensive thing, it was 100% a defensive thing in this capacity from what I saw. Right? I smelt fire, and this happened a lot. Now, let me get on the Trump hats, because I think this is the only time I really mentioned it throughout my whole Twitter thread. This was the thing that was most common as a thing that you could consider, that you could like put towards the BLM / Antifa / whatever the hell you want to call them people. The snatching of Trump hats. A lot of times there'll be like one or two Trumpers walking by through the crowd, and the crowd wouldn't like maul them apart or punch them or hit them. From what I saw, I have seen other footage that suggests different things. But, like, again, like, some of it's been put out by the president. It's very misleading. If you look at the full footage, there were scuffles before that, whatever. But I'm just talking about what I saw. The worst I would saw from an offensive capacity on, like, the individual Trump supporter walking through is somebody would, throw water on them, right? Would throw water on them, or, in this capacity, take a Trump hat and burn it, right? Some took them as, like, kind of like, quote unquote, I guess, a war prize. I don't know what to call it, but, like, they would snatch a lot of hats. And that's something I saw consistently throughout the night. Hats being snatched. Is that something I did not participate in that, but it's something that I saw a lot of. I saw a lot of hats being snatched and Trump gear that was captured or left behind. Vast majority of it, when they went to Freedom Plaza, was just Trump gear that people left and burnt, like, Trump signs, because there was trash everywhere. Just Trump shirts, there was a few shirts, a few hats, but mostly just signs. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. I was gonna do a thread start here, but then I just didn't because I was taking too much time. More small scuffles broke out. Someone tried to grab a flag. Okay, that I'm trying to remember this. I would go into more detail, but I have a better example later I'm going to show. But look who showed up to the Million MAGA March. The All Gas No Brakes person. The dude from YouTube. The dude who does all the interviews. And you know what I did after I saw him and took a picture? I gave him an interview. And I told him that I told him Biden was not far enough and we need Hunter Biden 2024. And when asked about the laptops, I said 3 laptops was not enough. I need 4 or 5 to really think Hunter is serious about running this country. So that was my interview with him. You know, I'm just memeing, but going back and forth, having fun with him, right? Because I know the best clips he has and the best chance I was going to get of getting on the video was just by being funny. Because if I gave like yeah, I'm here because I'm here to support my community, I know the best shot was aiming for the Hunter Biden stuff. Right? Okay. So after this is the one serious scuffle that happened during these early stages, before the march happened, like when we marched around the city. This is the only serious scuffle. You can see very little here. But if you see that yellow vest, what happened was there was a man who was walking through, and a lot of times most of the Trump supporters walk through, they'd be heckled, Nazi, they'd say back, get a job, and then they'd get through and it'd be fine, and the cops would open a police line to get through, right? That's what happened most of the time. A few times people would snatch a hat. And this in particular, I didn't see a lot of hat snatching in this stage, but it was much later. I saw most of the hat snatching. But in this stage, somebody's hat was taken. And so the guy turned around with a pole he was carrying. It might have had an American flag on it, but he had a pole. And he hit the guy in the back like 4 times while he was running away with his hat. And at that point, people swarmed him. Nobody threw a punch. They kind of just pushed him against the wall. And at that point, cops rushed in. And when I mean rushed in, I mean I was looking at what was going on. I turned around and I see a cop like 5 feet from me, and I get shoved to the kind of like the side, and I kind of back away, press myself against the wall. The cops move in, take the Trump person, drag him out, and bring him away. I don't know what happened to the Trump person. I don't know if he was arrested for swinging the thing. I don't know if if he just walked away. I have no clue what happened to the Trump person. I know that the person who stashed the hat got away though. Yeah, I have no clue what happened to the Trump person. But the cops rushed in, and this was some of the post footage of that. And that was and again, this shows how early on it was mostly peaceful. This was the biggest scuffle that happened in the early stages. This right here, what I just described, was the biggest thing, the biggest cop interaction during the early stages. I'm 100% serious. That was the biggest thing that happened. So, obviously, the biggest threat to the West, that mass terror ensued. Basically the Taliban, obviously. Anyway. After that, you could see this is the police line. Now, this is something that was interesting throughout the night, how it changed. So, at every location, basically, there was a line of police with bikes. And during the first half, there was always somewhere and you would see there was one line that would form here, a second line would form on another side of the street, and a third line would form on the other side of the street, and that was all around BLM Plaza. The only place there wasn't a police line was the exit to and from BLM Plaza, the road that actually had the words Black Lives Matter on it, all the way up through the Hilton. And these were basically here to contain the crowds. And so I guess Trump supporters can get in, they could part, and they'd kind of march through it. And it was basically to contain the crowds for all intents and purposes. Again, the only rush from the police that I saw of this was earlier that I already talked about. And see, this is one of the examples of early on, there was very little like conflict. These are some Trump supporters. They walked right through the crowd. Besides some yelling at them, really nothing happened. And this was really, and that was the story for much of the early stages. Almost completely peaceful, like 98% of interactions were peaceful. The one interaction I told you about with the cops rushed in was the only instance where you could say it really got violent, and it was for like 20 seconds. And it was only 2 people. This was really interesting. I was walking by, and you know those people with the Jesus Saves signs that a lot of times show up at protests? They were there. And they were, saying whatever. I didn't really hear what they were saying, but I walked by them. And one of them, a woman in the middle of their little thing, there was like 4 or 5 of them, had a sign. And she was dressed in like really like old-timey clothing. I'm not saying pilgrim, but I'm saying like, it didn't look exactly, I couldn't pin it down, but it was old-timey clothing, right? And she had a sign that said, "Women belong in the kitchen." And I assume that was, that was just her moral stance on, like, women should be, like, homemakers. But it was just really bizarre to see that at the, I don't know if she was a Trump supporter or they just went there because there's going to be crowds there and they wanted to save people, bring them to Jesus. But yeah, it was just an interesting thing I saw. Pretty bizarre. Pretty bizarre. That's really, it has nothing, no big dialogue. Okay, this is when the tide maybe turns a little bit. Okay, so the march begins. They start moving forward, right? Now, in between this and something else, this is the I would say the probably the worst thing I saw from, I shouldn't put that in quotations, the worst thing I saw from the, like, quote-unquote Antifa's people, the people dressed in clad with the shields or something. There was a kind of a scuffle. By the way, you'll see a lot of boarded up, like, stores in DC leading up to BLM Plaza. Vast majority were not boarded up, actually. Only a very few actually did board up. And you could tell that because there were actually outside restaurants active near BLM Plaza where Trump supporters were eating. And there was some yelling arguments. I think someone threw a water bottle, but eventually somebody actually, like, lit a firework and threw it. I saw it go over my head. I saw it land, and I would have taken a picture, but obviously I was more concerned with running away from the fireworks, so that's why I'm telling you this now. I didn't put it in a Twitter thread because this Hilton thing happened right after I talk about right here. So they threw it. It exploded. I looked over and I saw some smoke, but nobody was hurt. Thankfully, nobody got hurt. And that was basically the high point for, I guess you could say, Antifa violence. And nobody really got hurt from that. And at least from what I saw. So, after that, this Hilton thing happened. So we're walking by the Hilton. And I think some Trump supporters saw the crowd coming by. And so they came outside to the Hilton with American flags and Trump hats. And they were like, Antifa, BLM, screw you, da-da-da-da-da. And then Antifa yells at, and BLM people, yell it back. And again, I'm using these terms vaguely because, again, the idea that Antifa is an organization and people, like, propose that it is blows my mind because I didn't go there and have to, like, sign some Antifa sign-up sheet. I didn't go there and, like, hey, I'm part of the Antifa. I mean, I guess you could just say I didn't engage in any, like, violence or, like, destruction of property or anything like that. So was I part of Antifa? I don't know. Well, again, it's not an organization. So I'm just using terms that people understand, but they might not be completely accurate. So they kind of, after the Trump supporters come out, they kind of move towards the hotel and they kind of start engaging, they start yelling, and the cops rush in. And this is the first time that it got closest. Yeah, counter-protesters is actually the best term. Counter-protesters. That's what I referred to them before in my tweets. Counter-protesters. So the counter-protesters and the Trump people get close, and the cops rush in to stop anything from happening. They get between the Trump people, they get between the counter-protesters, and nothing really happens. This is I would say this is a pretty good picture of what was going on there, because if you go in there, you can see the cops right here rushing in. On the second day, I actually walked by here. I was able to see it from without the crowds. And there was people in the cars actually waiting to go into the hotel, so it was really interesting to kind of just see them look around kind of confused at what was going on. Anyway, shortly after this, I just keep walking, and I see an anti-masker protester. Now, nobody was really wearing masks on the pro-Trump side that I saw. I saw, like, again, 2 or 3. But this guy especially wasn't wearing a mask because he was an anti-masker protester, and he was carrying around Fauci to fraud, fire Fauci, the masks are a lie type stuff. And he was just running around yelling that and basically being a nuisance with no mask and risking getting everybody infected. Then this was actually, I thought, a pretty cute chant. I thought it was pretty original. Chanting, how do you spell MAGA? I mean, how do you spell loser? They'd say MAGA. And I thought it was, well, they'd actually yell MJE. It would be MAGA. And it went for a while, and it got a good pop. It was a decent chant. Locals, by the way, this is something I want to hit on right now. Because I'm getting a lot of people who used to be concerned about outside agitators that seem to have completely forgotten about this concern. Completely forgotten about this concern. Every single one of the rioters, a Biden supporter, I can't even call them rioters because I didn't really see a riot occur from my perspective. They didn't break. I didn't see them smash up a single business. I didn't see them smash up a single window. I didn't see them smash up anything. I think I saw, I guess the closest you could say to that I saw some graffiti, but the graffiti was on one of the boards that someone put up to protect their business. One of the few businesses that did that. So I don't know if that's rioting, because it didn't like damage the business. And the other instances, I guess you could say, is when they burnt like Trump like signs that were left over. But I mean, I don't know if I can really call that rioting. The closest you could say at this stage is about it being a riot would maybe be the scuffles, but that happens a lot of protesters generally nowadays. So I mean, you would have to call any protest where there's counter protests a riot going forward. So I'm not really going to classify it as that from what I saw. Anyway, so yeah, anti-masker protester and the locals. I was about to talk about the locals. And hey, Lumi, how's it going? The locals, and what I'm talking about right now is, as locals, I'm talking people who work in DC, people who live in DC, and people from the area, and people I saw with Maryland and Virginia license plates. I'm talking DMV, the metropolitan area. That's what I'm talking about, right? And you know what? I saw somebody saying, like, I bet none of those, like, I think I tweeted a response to it, but somebody was in my reply saying, I bet none of those people even live in DC. And I'm like, oh, are you from the DMV? And that person actually responded to me saying, oh, you mean the Department of Motor Vehicles? And I wanted to just die. How could you be like, you're not from DC? And I'm like, you're from the DMV. Oh, you mean the Department of Motor Vehicles? And for people who aren't clear, DMV, if you're not from my area, starts for DC, Maryland, and Virginia. It's basically everything the metro touches. Anyway, the locals, they would get out of the car, they would support us, they would honk their horns, they would clap. The locals, the people who lived in DC, and the people who were within DC seemed to be very supportive. And I would also say that when I talked to counter-protesters, they all seemed to be from the area. And I'm talking about the areas of the metro touch. I'm talking, like, Arlington, Virginia. I'm talking Maryland, Prince George's County, maybe Anne Arundel. They were from, and of course DC itself. Anything the metro kind of touched, right? And in that, I'm sorry if I'm not thanking people for subs right now. I'm just trying to concentrate on the story. I don't want to lose track. And so I talked to locals, and the reason I could tell most of the counter protesters were local is I would ask them about the metro, and they'd be like, "Hey, I just want to check. I'm pretty sure like metro closes at 11, right? Because I'm used to the metro closing at 11, but I haven't had to use the metro since COVID really happened because I didn't have to go to school anymore. I could just do it from home." And they all were like, "Yep, 11 has always been 11, still 11." And another one was like, "Yep, 11." And I could tell by just talking to them about the metro routes if they lived in the area. I did have a few interactions with Trump protesters, just me talking to them one-on-one. And that would mostly happen if I walked in front of the protesters and there'd be Trump people who were just walking by or exploring the city. And a lot of times I'd see them in a hat and be like, "Hey, a lot of these people don't seem really happy tonight. You might want to take that off or like walk in that direction. I mean, I just don't want anything to happen." And a few times they were thankful, other times it kind of just blew me off. But I could tell from like accents, and I could tell that they really didn't know the area. Like I didn't really interact with a Trump protester who knew. I think the next day I interacted with a few Trump people who seemed to be from the area. But that day, the vast majority of them didn't give me any sign of them being from DC. Anyway, so the locals vastly supportive of the counter protesters. DC went heavily for Biden. I think it was over 90% for Biden or in the 80%, but it, like the last time I saw it was like 93%. I'd have to go back and check. Let me actually check. DC presidential election. Let me check results. Yep, it was 93%. So, obviously, it makes sense that the vast majority of them were in support of the protesters. Which gets me on a point I want to hit on right now, before we get into, like, the muddy waters we're about to get to. The local people, the people who are local, are voted for Joe Biden overwhelmingly. One of the most pro-Biden areas in the country. Over 93% for Biden. Absurd numbers. All the signs I saw were Biden signs. I didn't see a single Trump sign. It was hardcore blue country. It is the bluest of blue cities. And the locals did not like Trump. They think him rejecting the election is ridiculous. And they saw these people as people from all across the country coming into their community and making a fuss. And so when I hear a lot of the same people who used to whine about outside agitators not do it right now, when we have people who don't even live here coming in en masse, not asked by anybody who lives here to come here, besides maybe Trump himself, who's living here for what, a few more months? It just feels like it was never really genuine. I mean, huge shocker, but the people in the community didn't really want the Trump protesters there and were very supportive of the counter protesters. Okay, let's go to the next part. Hey, Shark. So this is where it starts to get like you actually see lines drawn. This is where lines get drawn in the sand. This is where you actually saw Trump people and the later counter protesters really just interacting en masse. And this is where the cops started to divide them. So the cops got in the way beforehand because there were Trump people already there located protesting because maybe they knew we were marching down that way. And they both got in front of each other, and let me tell you what happened. It's really graphic. They yelled at each other, and you want to know the chant I heard the most from the counter protesters? It was Nazi, screw you, da da da. It was something like that, and from the counter protest, or it was like, you guys lost the elections, give up. And then the Trump people would say back, get a job, and that was that for like 30 minutes. So nothing, and you know what? This is what I expected to happen and hoped would happen. And so this, I'm happy about. This is the cops, in my opinion, supposedly doing the job. This is what I think should happen. They divided, they stopped anything from happening. Good here, right? So there's really not more for me to comment on this. Just them yelling at each other. A few people recognized me from Twitch, which was cool. Not really important to the bigger story though. Right here is where the Proud Boys arrived. I have no pictures of this specific interaction, and the reason why is because the cops moved in so fast. They moved in so fast. And I need to use the bathroom, so I'll be right back. Did you guys like that? I actually had to use the bathroom, so I had to do it at some point. Anyway, where was I? Where was I? Oh, yes. Okay. So, what happens is, we're marching, we're continuing the march. We eventually leave that spot, and we just keep marching. And, by the way the march kind of worked is we had one person, and I'm not going to describe what they looked like. So, they were just a person in the middle, with a microphone, who'd basically direct people, and like, we're going down this street now, and they would kind of, sometimes they would communicate to the shields like, hey, go over there. It was kind of just like put together. It was not like somebody signed up like, I am the leader. It was just, they had the voice, they took it. They took that leadership and they kind of led people in that direction. And sometimes they'd say, hey, no, wait up. We need to wait for the people in the back to catch up. It worked pretty well for what it was. So, we start marching in another direction. I forget which street. And the Proud Boys arrive. And when I mean they arrive, I mean they arrive. They don't unlike the Trump protesters, they didn't just stand there and yell stuff. They started moving towards us really quick. They turned a corner, we turned a corner. They saw us. We kind of moved a few steps, kind of stood there. They saw us and they started speed walking, or some of them looked like they were jogging towards us. And when they were jogging towards us, these people weren't just coming up to us to give a hug. They were yelling hard, which itself isn't anything, but some were going like this, and others put their hands up, and they were getting close. I mean, I thought they were about to I thought one was gonna tackle me. They were coming so fast. The cops though ran in really quick when they saw what was about to occur, because it was the Proud Boys coming this way, and I could tell they were Proud Boys because they had that weird kind of Roman thing that goes around the PB. There's a PB letter. I didn't actually see the Proud Boys logo before that point on anything, but it was like a Roman thing and then a P and a B in it. and they were running. They were like coming like this, they were coming like that. They're all coming up ready to fight, and I mean they were ready to fight, and the cops got in the way just in time. But what it seemed like, and this is what it seemed like. It seemed like the Proud Boys were like pushing the cops forward almost, because the cops, once they got in front, got in between us, were just like shouting "move" to us, and they were going forward. The problem was though, and the idea of them doing that was to divide us from the Proud Boys. But as they pushed forward to get us away from the Proud Boys would be right on their ass following them. So there was no real difference between us and the Proud Boys. And so the Proud Boys looked at this like, oh no, they're retreating because we were following the police's instructions and slowly moving back. And so they got even more hyped, and it seemed like some of them wanted to burst through the cops and get in there, but the cops held it, and eventually they developed like a second line, and there was like 2 lines, keeping like a distance there, and from there it just became a shouting match until eventually we moved on. But there, I'm telling you, I saw it in their eyes. They were charging. They were ready to fight. They were ready to fight. They had their hands up. They came up like, come at me, come on, you want to go? They were yelling this, they were yelling that. They wanted to fight. From that interaction, everybody in that crowd, I could tell, came into this city with the premier purpose of wanting to beat people up, wanting to fight, wanting to attack whatever they think the enemy is. And that night, we were the enemy. We were the enemy that night that they wanted to fight. So, after the Proud Boys did that, eventually we moved on. I gotta remember what happened next. Oh yeah, okay. So this is a huge jump, and the reason why of what's occurring is I'll try to describe what happened between. But my phone is dying, as you can see. My phone died shortly after, because I was there for like a very long time. But after that, we march around until we get to the area where the actual rally itself was actually held, a big part of it, and that's where there was a bunch of Trump gear. I'm talking Trump signs, a few Trump hats. There was a few tents still up. There was, I think, a few Trump shirts. There was a few, like, put together signs that said random, like, put Hillary in jail, stuff like that. And as we arrive there, the march kind of stops, and we all just kind of mingle and talk a little bit. And then people start to burn the signs. They put them in little like piles and start burning the signs. The trash that was left there. And after the stuff started to get burned, flashbangs got deployed. Or as long as what I thought the flashbangs were. What I saw is from the police line, which was down one of the roads, something with smoke in the back of it was like shot up, and then boom. And it happened like 3 times. And it was extremely loud, a lot louder than the firework earlier, and I could only think if it came from the police line, it must have been a flashbang. And so I tweeted out quickly, flashbangs were deployed, and that, after that point, now I could tell why people were very worried, which was after flashbangs are deployed, everybody's like, yo, get out, stay safe, stuff like that. This is the worst time for my phone to die, but my phone died. So I follow flashbangs deployed with my phone died. Probably wasn't the best way to indicate that I'm going to try my best to stay safe. I probably should have followed it up with something like, hey, my phone is dying. I know when I'm going to get home. I know how I'm going to get home. Don't worry. But yeah, I didn't have a power bank. You're right. I should have asked around for a power bank. The next day I did bring a power bank. So after that, why is this all here? Where is my main tweet? Here it is. Okay. So this is the next thing I tweeted. After that. This is the next thing I tweeted. So let me talk to you about what happened after the flashbangs were deployed. After the flashbangs were deployed, we started walking in a new direction. And we just marched around for a while, to be completely honest. Once a while, someone would stick a Trump flag out of their hotel, and somebody would like do laser pointers at them. Some people had like Roman candles they lit. Nothing of real significance happened. There was a few yelling fights. Some people snatched. This is where most of the Trump hats got snatched as people were walking by. At one point, someone tried to sneak up, snatch a Trump hat, and the person was like, ah! And then the two had, like, banter, like, ah, you got me. It was like, damn, it was weird. It was almost like friendly banter, but then, like, it was like, they topped it off with, like, fuck yous, right? It was really weird. Anyway. Eventually, we arrive at just some street. It was just like a street like any other, really. It was just like another just mindless street. And I see, and a few other people see, some people, like a crowd of people, like silk out, like come out into the road. My cam died, but I just gonna have to wait for it to come back to life. Really bad time for it to die. Anyway, they kind of sink out into the road, and they kind of come around a corner while we're on the street, and we're kind of just standing put. We're waiting people to catch up to us, and that's why we're kind of standing in place. And I'm looking at this crowd of people coming towards us, and I'm wondering, like, is that another protest party? Is that this? Is that that? I have no clue what this group of people are. But eventually, as they start speed walking towards us, like speed walking towards us very aggressively, and I look, and I hear somebody say "Proud Boys," and I look at them, and I see on their shirts that same insignia that I saw earlier. Some of them had that, some of them had camo, some of them had it was a lot of different clothing in the group. Some of them just had Trump gear on, but I saw Proud Boy shirts. And that's when I realize that is a bunch of Proud Boys, which after the fact we would find out there was a lot more Proud Boys than there were us, running straight for us. And I turn around, and me and a few other people just start yelling, "It's the Proud Boys." And before, maybe I wouldn't have yelled that as if like it's some huge warning signal, but after seeing how eager they were to fight earlier, how they came here to fight from every interaction I had with them, seeing them start running at us for like 2 to 3 blocks, they were speed walking, they were trying to rush us. The only thing I could think of to do was to inform everybody that the Proud Boys were here and they were charging at us, which they were. So they're charging. I yell "Proud Boys," and so do a few other people. And we get closer into the group, and I start yelling "Proud Boys, Proud Boys, Proud Boys," hoping that the people in the back would hear us and come up, right? Thinking that maybe if they see us all in a group, they won't do anything. And as I'm yelling "Proud Boys," I hear somebody, I think one of the people who are quote-unquote leading, again, not leaders, but one of the people who have been taking charge, call for the shields. And as they get closer and closer, the shields move up. The shield wall we saw earlier move up. And as that shield wall moves up, the Proud Boys, right when the shield wall gets there, and there's still a few people, just counter-protesters in front of the shield wall, the Proud Boys smack into us. And the first thing and I didn't see it, but I saw footage after that shows it. Somebody tries to, runs up, tries to flank somebody and come up behind them. A counter-protester with like is just standing there and tries to sucker punch him. And that guy falls on his ass. So, I mean, that's funny. But he just falls straight on his ass. Another person, and I'm standing there, I'm watching this go down. Another guy I saw go straight up to the shield people, who must have been double the size of the people behind the shields. And the shield people are actively backing up. They're taking small steps backward. They don't charge. It's not used in a defensive capacity. He just throws his body. This guy throws his body into the shields. He throws it like full force in his body into the shields. Enter next, thank you for the raid. So he throws his body into the shields, and his hat gets knocked off. And I'm standing there like, what am I supposed to do? Because I see this guy throwing himself into the shields for no other reason to do that. To push him back. To, in my mind, and this is what I think, to attack him. Very clearly. To break the shields out of their hands, so maybe get a few strikes in. And while I'm standing there thinking if I should engage in violence, eventually I stand there and I don't. Because I didn't want to punch anybody. I didn't want to fight anybody. I don't like fighting people. I honestly don't. I don't like engaging in violence. There's a reason why people call me a hippie. I liked boxing, right? Boxing is fun, but boxing just because everybody agrees to participate and it's in a safe environment. Like, this is in the middle of the street with people have poles and knives and pepper spray. I didn't want to engage in that stuff, so I didn't throw a punch. I didn't throw a punch for the entirety of the thing that happened. And so, but somebody else who was perfectly fine getting involved, as this guy's pushing into the shield wall, comes up behind him with a pole, after they're charged into us, and he smacks him in the back. Starts smacking him, and the guy eventually falls back and gets with the rest of the Proud Boys. So I watched that happen. I turn my head, and somebody with mace, sprays it. And it gets like this close from my head. It just gets in my hair. Most of it evaporates. None of it hits me, but it makes me like very aware. I don't know if he was aiming. I looked at him and he kind of looked at me and he didn't do it again. I don't know if he was aiming for me. I don't know if he was just doing that to keep us at bay or to force us back. I have no clue why he did that, but he did that. Right? There's a few people like throwing punches to my left, to my right. At this point, my body is just between me and a bunch of people behind me who are falling back. So I'm on the front, and my arms are either by my sides or like this, but I haven't thrown a single punch. And thankfully, nobody decided to charge me. Nobody decided to go at me. He did it because Mace hurts. Yeah, I assume Mace hurts. Nobody decided to do that. And the scuffles continue. They keep punching, but I can tell you from everything I saw, it was the Proud Boys rushing in and going like that. And eventually, the shield people, God bless them, they hold them back for long enough that we're able to fall back. But during that whole interaction, the cops didn't do anything. And I mean literally nothing. They didn't get in between us. They didn't stop them. They didn't rush. The Proud Boys ran up like 3 or 4 blocks. It's not like the cops didn't see it. The cops were following us during the march the whole night. The cops were down the road. There was one cops here, one cops there. There wasn't a lot of them, but there were cops there. There were cops behind us, and there were cops at the sides. I don't know if there were cops behind the Proud Boys, but there were cops too. I couldn't see because there's too many. There were cops at the side of us, the cops behind. They didn't do anything. And at that point, what I see happen is we start falling back. People who are hit, busted open, attacked, they fall back. The Proud Boys keep pushing forward. Eventually, the cops got in between it. If I remember correctly, the cops eventually got in between it, tried to stop it from happening. And so we fall back. And what I see, man, dude, people were screwed up. The first thing I saw was somebody fully geared up, just slumped down on the wall. And I mean slumped down. I mean, he's not like leaning on the side. I mean, his head was on the wall and he was like this. And I walk up to the guy and I'm like, dude, you okay? You okay? And he just kind of does this to his face. I didn't see Suspect Sushi. He just points at his face, and I call for a medic, and thankfully we had medics. We had people with medical expertise there. We had people who were mediced up. They had gear, and I'm so thankful for that. I call for a medic. I bring a medic over to him, and he starts to help him. I didn't see, after that point, I just leave. Let's leave him. I run into another guy whose ear and like side of his head was busted open. He was bleeding. They were asking him if he wanted medical attention. He didn't want it. I saw this girl who was like 5'5". Her forehead was busted open. I saw the cut. It was like right here, and like her whole face was covered in blood. And I'm like, are you okay? Do you need a medic? And she doesn't even say anything. She's shell-shocked. And I mean that. She is shell-shocked. Like I'm talking to her, and her eyes are just like forward, and she just like kind of slowly turns and walks off while I'm asking her if she needs medical attention. And what I saw next, I'm not ever going to forget. What I saw next is I was walking down the line, and the medics were treating all these people, and I keep walking down the line and get towards the end where the people who I guess the first people who got out were. And I see this girl sitting down on a bench, and a guy's with her, and I hear she thinks she was stabbed. She said she might be stabbed. And I see her pull up her arm. And this girl must have been 5'4", really skinny white girl. She pulls up her arm, and she has a gash right here. And I'm not talking like blood. I mean, it was like a cut, right? And again, she was wearing a sleeve over it, meaning that it wasn't like anybody hit her there really hard. Someone must have stabbed her. She pulls it up, and she has a stab wound. And the thing is, she didn't have a face of panic. She had like, and then she looks down after it's pulled up, and it's like she like calculates for a second, and then her face and expression changed drastically. Pain goes all over her face. Her eyes close. She goes back. She puts her hand over. Before, her hand wasn't over it. She was slowly with the other person pulling up her thing, going back and forth. And we all realize she was just stabbed by a Proud Boy. In that area where we were all clashing, somebody stabbed this 5'4" girl, and maybe over there she had a weapon, I don't know, but I was looking at her, she didn't have any weapon, she was pretty small girl, she didn't look like she was a threat to anybody. Maybe I missed it, I don't know, I didn't see her get stabbed, so maybe she had a weapon there, but she didn't look like a threat to anyone. And so I was over there and people were getting stabbed like right next to me, and I just didn't see it. I almost got maced. I saw this person rush to shield wall, so pushing them back. Shield people didn't do anything. This girl gets stabbed in the arm, and so I look around because I'm fucking like, somebody's stabbed. They're bleeding. And I look around and someone says, where's the medic? And I look around. There are no medics. None. I walk to the end of the line. All the medics are over there at the other side, like treating people. I don't see any medics. Not to mention, all the medics are preoccupied with other people who have been screwed up. And so we have all these people being treated, and the person with the most extreme injury, someone who was stabbed, we don't have a medic for. And so I just run down the line, and I yell. And I know the cops heard me because I saw them look over when they heard me say it. And I say, someone was stabbed, where's the medic? Someone was stabbed, where's the medic? Someone was stabbed, where's the medic? So I'm running down the line, yelling this as loud as possible. And I actually saw somebody, like in a reply to my statement of what happened, say, why did you take pictures? Took pictures of everything else. Number one, if you look at my thread, you can see my phone died. I say, hey, my phone's about to die. Peace out. And number two, and you can ask Lycan too, because Lycan was asking to come down. And I told him now my phone's about to die. So I didn't just do it for performance, right? You can ask Lycan about it. But number two, let's say my phone was full of energy. Who is actually so messed up in the head that the first thing they think of when they see somebody with a stabbed wound is, oh, let me get a picture of this, not let me go get the medical help? How messed up do you actually have to be thinking that? Anyway, I'm running down the line. I'm yelling, where's the medic? Someone was stabbed. Where's the medic? Someone was stabbed. And while I'm yelling that, like, people are realizing that someone was stabbed, it travels through the group very quickly that somebody got stabbed. And as I get to the end, there's a line of cops organized in a weird way. They're organized in a block. They're not organized in the line fashion. And so they seem to be ready to mobilize almost. Anyway, at that point, I hope that I know medics must have heard me because I was screaming at the top of my lungs, and I'm at the bottom, and I look over and I'm back at the street where it originally happened, and cops are there dividing us, but I see the Proud Boys moving. And they're moving in this direction, which is the same direction kind of we travel down to heal up. And what I realize is they're about to flank us. While we're still treating people who were just stabbed and maimed and maced and beat up and charged, heads split open, stabbed in the arm, all this stuff. While we're still doing that, we're still preoccupied with getting medics to the people who need it, getting water to the people who are maced, doing all that. They're flanking us to go again. Because now that the cops are in the way, they got to move around. And so I look to a cop in one of those in that form of block I was talking, that weird block form they were in. And I say, they're about to flank us. Cop doesn't say anything to me. Look, maybe it's policy that they're not supposed to talk to us for whatever reason. But if I tell you, yo, they're about to attack us, they're about to flank us, they're about to do this, a simple hey, you got to talk to somebody else, or hey, I don't direct this, I don't direct that, would have been nice. He didn't say anything. I tell him, and that's what they did. They went and flanked us. I go travel back down, and there's a little alleyway which cops are blocking off between us and them, and they are moving in that direction. I see the bodies moving. Viv, I'm gonna tell you about this. The cop laughing, because there was a cop later that laughed. Viv. So I move down, people still being treated, and they flank. They come around a corner, and oh my gosh, there must have been like 200 of them, at least 200, and there was like 50 to 60 of us. So there was way more of them than there were us. And the cops get there just in time to stop 200 people. And this clearing little area, there was like a street with a bush in the middle. They could have gone over that bush, and they could have gone on all these people who were too preoccupied with helping people who were stabbed and beat up. And the cops get there just in time to stop them. But they just start yelling like, "You're lucky the cops are here. I'd kill you. I'd kill you. This ain't a right to... I can't carry guns over here because in DC you just can't open carry." Just like some of the vitriolic stuff. And of course, the people who were just like, stabbed and beat up, they start yelling back too, because the counter protesters obviously are not very happy towards the people who just rushed them, right? And let me be clear, they rushed us. We didn't rush them, they rushed us and then tried to flank us. They're yelling, they're spitting, they're doing whatever, they're doing their thing. And again, none of them wearing masks. And the whole time you're like, you better be thankful the cops are here. Da 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 da. As if if the cops weren't there, they just kill us all or whatever. And so at that point, I get on this rock, or it's not like a rock, it's like the thing in the middle of the street that held the bush in. It's kind of hard to describe, but I get on top of it. It's this thing in the middle of the street, and I look up there and I start chatting with this other person, and I'm just saying look how many there are. They just stabbed a girl. And we're just kind of all still baffled. It's still everybody's still realizing that there was people stabbing people out here. Yeah, planter basically. And after that, we eventually keep moving, and I kind of look over to somebody, and this person would help me out later, and I'm so thankful to this person. I say, "Hey, my phone's dead. This might be on the news that somebody got stabbed. Can I call my house phone off of this?" And this person said yes. I asked somebody earlier and they said no. This person said yes. They handed me the phone. I called home. I told them what was going on, that if anything's on the news about stabbings or anything, I wasn't the stabber or the stabbee. I'm home. I'm here. I'm safe. People are protecting me, and I'm so thankful for all the people who were there with me. And at that point, I give him back his phone, and we just march for a tiny bit more. But eventually, while we're marching back with all these injured people, somebody gets up and said, "Hey, injured people go that way, people who are fine that way. If you're going to leave, travel in groups because you could get jumped," which was true. Because I saw somebody try to sucker punch one of our people when he was just slightly outside of the crowd. So it is true they'd be willing to do that. So at that point, the metro's near. I hear somebody else wants to go on the metro. The person who gave me the phone says, "Do you need to leave?" And I was like, "Yeah, actually, this is a great chance for me because it's the metro." And I thought about staying because I wanted to stay. But I also know that the metro closed at 11. And this is going to be one of the few stations we're going to be near for maybe a little bit. So we get in a group of 7. It was 6 or 7. And we all travel down to the metro. So I was going to use the metro to get home. And Suspect Sushi... You don't want to say that in chat right now. Don't get me worked up, Suspect. Don't get me worked up. Anyway, we travel back to the metro, and on the way back, we pass a cop, and I don't say anything to the cop, but one of the people with us said something to the and the cop was laughing or something, and the person says "One of our friends got stabbed tonight. Great job," and the cop just keeps laughing. The cop just keeps laughing. And I stand there baffled that somebody's just told that someone got fucking stabbed. And it's like a joke. Anyway, we go down there. We all travel in a group to stay safe. I get down there, and I basically we go in there, we travel. I have to take a separate route from them. So I go home on a train alone, and I just thought about everything that happened, and that was the first night, and it was a lot. It was a lot. CDN, don't, let's not, let's just back off. Everybody back off. Don't make threats in chat. Whatever you do, don't make fucking threats in chat, okay? Look. But this is what I'll say. That was a horrible experience. I had a horrible experience there. It was terrible, and every interaction I had with a Proud Boy was them basically want to kick my ass. Every interaction I had with a Proud Boy was absolutely toxic. These people who don't live in our community, don't live in the DMV, coming here beating up other people. Stabbing people, man. Do you know how much it messes with your head? You want to go there to protest in a country that's like a democracy where free speech is like a thing you're supposed to have? And you end your night by having to go get medics for a girl who must have been like at most 5'4" who got stabbed? How much that messes with you? This is the community I went to take your child to work day with my grandfather. These are the same streets my grandfather took me up to go to the print and press area at the Mint. This is the same area I spend with my friends and eat and like go to food carts and stuff. Just chill and hang out, man. These are like the same area that like I grew up in. It's the DMV, man. DC is the city that put food on my plate. It's the city that I went there to eat. It's the city I went there to hang out with friends. It was every single like field trip we had at school was to DC because we were always so close. DMV is born and raised. I've never been anywhere. I don't know anywhere else. I don't know anywhere else. And these people come from without my community, come into it, and end up stabbing people. It hurts, man. It hurts. It really does.